Rain poured like tears from heaven as Nneka knelt on the wet pavement, clutching a torn wedding photograph. Her fingers trembled, smearing the faces of two people who once smiled as one. Obinna stood before her in the parking lot, suitcase in hand, his eyes empty of the warmth she once knew. Neighbors watched from apartment windows as he turned his back and walked toward his waiting Uber. Lightning split the sky, illuminating her broken form on the concrete. If only she knew that the test she designed would burn everything she held sacred. Love had lived here once, but now only ashes remained. The wise ones whispered warnings she never heeded, and now the cost lay heavy on her shoulders. How does a peaceful home crumble into dust? That is the question we must answer. But first, we must go back to when their love was young and the world seemed kind. 2 years before the storm, Nneka and Obinna were the envy of their Lagos neighborhood. Their laughter filled the morning air as they managed their small online clothing business from their apartment. Customers came not just for quality but to witness their joy on video calls. Obinna would tease his wife about her careful budgeting, and she would playfully scold him for offering too many discounts to friends. Amaka, Nneka's childhood friend, often helped with packaging and deliveries. She was beautiful, with a kind smile that made customers trust their brand. The three worked as one, and their Instagram followers praised their harmony. Older relatives pointed to them as proof that marriage could still be sweet in modern times. But even in paradise, shadows wait. Nneka's aunt who lived upstairs would sometimes shake her head and mutter ancient wisdom to herself. Sometimes, the snake you feed will one day hunger for your heart. The first whisper came through a DM on Instagram. Nneka was editing product photos when a message arrived from an old classmate. The woman claimed she'd seen Obinna at the mall, laughing too closely with a young lady at the food court. Another message followed days later, this time from a neighbor, saying with false concern that love becomes boring when a wife gets too comfortable. The words pierced deeper than intended. Nneka began scrolling through Obinna's social media, searching for signs she'd missed. That evening, she watched him as he ate dinner, searching his face for distance. He smiled at her as always, unaware of the storm building behind her eyes. But the damage was done. That night, she lay awake beside him in their bedroom, listening to his peaceful breathing, while her phone glowed in the darkness. The comment sections felt full of warnings. Doubt whispered its first deadly suggestions through the blue light. Small things became evidence. When Obinna returned home 30 minutes late from meeting a supplier, Nneka questioned him with sharp words. When he smiled at a notification on his phone, she demanded to see who messaged him. He showed her without hesitation, a meme from his cousin, but her suspicion had already painted him guilty. Amaka noticed the change during a video call and visited one afternoon, bringing takeout and concern. Nneka confided her fears over jollof rice, and Amaka urged patience, reminding her that Obinna had always been faithful. When a heart starts searching for fault, even kindness looks like deceit. Trust is a fragile thing. Once cracked, every drop of doubt seeps through. One evening, Obinna's phone died while he was at the gym. When he called from a friend's phone minutes later, Nneka's voice was cold. Something in her mind had snapped, and reason fled. Amaka arrived the next day carrying suya and soft drinks. She found Nneka sitting on the balcony, staring at traffic below. The confession poured out between tears. Nneka spoke of sleepless nights, of feeling invisible, of fearing that another woman would steal what she'd built. Amaka listened, holding her friend's hand, advising her to communicate honestly with Obinna rather than assume the worst. But Nneka's aunt was in the kitchen, her ears sharp despite pretending to cook. She paused, stirring her pot slowly, and muttered words meant to be heard through the open door. Advice from a friend can build or break a home. Nneka looked up suddenly, an idea forming in her troubled mind. She gripped Amaka's wrist tightly and asked a dangerous question, "Will you help me test him?" Amaka's smile faltered. She should have refused. But friendship is a chain that binds even when wisdom counsels freedom. And so the trap was set. The plan took shape over wine that evening on the balcony. Nneka explained it carefully, her voice steady despite the madness of her words. Amaka would flirt with Obinna through messages and in person, just enough to see if his loyalty held or crumbled. Nothing serious, just compliments, subtle suggestions, playful emojis. If he remained faithful, Nneka's fears would rest. If not, she would know the truth. Amaka hesitated, her conscience screaming warnings she tried to voice. But Nneka's desperation was fierce, and the bonds of childhood friendship tightened like rope. Finally, Amaka nodded, though her stomach twisted. When mistrust enters a woman's heart, even love becomes a battlefield. What Nneka did not see was the flicker in Amaka's eyes when she agreed. What Amaka did not admit, even to herself, was how often she'd noticed Obinna's intelligence, his ambition, his gentle voice. The test was set. And three hearts walked unknowing toward destruction. Amaka began slowly, as instructed. She started texting Obinna more often about business matters, adding laughing emojis and casual compliments. She came to the apartment more frequently, wearing newer outfits. She laughed louder at Obinna's jokes, letting her hand brush his when exchanging packages. Obinna, innocent and unsuspecting, responded with the same friendliness he showed everyone. Nneka watched from the bedroom doorway, her heart pounding. She saw Amaka lean close to show Obinna something on her phone. She saw him smile warmly. Each gesture felt like betrayal, though nothing wrong had occurred. The elder voice whispers through time, warning those who might listen, spying on love only invites sorrow. After they finished walking, Obinna said something that made Nneka's blood freeze. "You should come by more often, really helps having you here." Amaka smiled, and Nneka's chest tightened until she could barely breathe. That evening, she could barely look at her husband. The test had begun. And already, it was poisoning everything. That night, Nneka's restraint shattered. She accused Obinna of being too friendly with Amaka, her voice sharp with barely controlled rage. He looked genuinely confused, laughing at first, thinking she was joking. When he realized she was serious, his smile faded. "Amaka is like a sister," he said gently, reaching for her hand across their couch. She pulled away. The words stung worse than silence. If Amaka was like family, why did he smile so warmly? Why did he want her around more? Obinna tried to explain, but Nneka turned her back, pretending to scroll through her phone though her eyes burned with tears. Later that night, her phone buzzed in the darkness. A WhatsApp message from Amaka, "He's kind, maybe too kind." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Nneka stared at those words until they blurred. The test was working. But with each passing hour, her peace died a little more. She had wanted proof of his love. Instead, she was building evidence of doubt. Amaka told herself it was just pretense. She was helping her friend, nothing more. But alone in her studio apartment at night, she found herself thinking about Obinna's voice, the way his eyes focused when he explained business strategies. She remembered how patient he was with difficult customers, how he never raised his voice even when stressed by deadlines. These thoughts should have stayed locked away, but the test had opened a door in her heart. She began to notice things she'd ignored before: his dedication to fitness, the way he dressed well even for casual days, his ambition to grow their business. One evening, exhausted from deliveries, Amaka fell asleep thinking of him. She dreamed they were at a rooftop restaurant together, his hand in hers, laughing at some shared joke. She woke suddenly, her phone glowing with notifications, horror flooding through her. What was happening to her? This was her best friend's husband. But the heart, once stirred, does not easily return to stillness. Weeks passed, and Nneka's unease grew. Amaka was posting better photos on Instagram now, taking more care with her makeup. She wore the gold jewelry Obinna once casually mentioned looked elegant. She asked more questions about his goals, his dreams, his childhood during their work sessions. Obinna, grateful for the help and company, shared freely, never seeing the danger. He did not notice how Amaka's gaze lingered on his face during video meetings. He did not feel the weight of her attention. Nneka noticed everything. She checked the timestamps on their WhatsApp conversations. She measured the frequency of their interactions when she wasn't around. Her suspicion fed on itself, growing monstrous. Yet still, she said nothing about the test. Sometimes, the devil enters not through enemies, but through helpers. Evil rarely announces itself with thunder. More often, it arrives wearing a familiar face, speaking words of friendship, destroying from within where walls are weakest. Obinna bought a designer scarf from an online boutique, sleek black with silver threading. He meant it as a thank you gift for Amaka's months of unpaid help. Before he could present it, Nneka saw the email confirmation on their shared iPad. Her hands shook as she read the amount, the description, the delivery date. She said nothing at dinner, watching him eat Chinese takeout, waiting for him to mention it. He didn't. To Obinna, it was a minor kindness he'd give her next time she visited. To Nneka, it was confirmation of her darkest fears. A gift, secret and planned. Her jealousy exploded inside like a breaking dam. She screenshot the email, her breathing sharp and painful. That night, she lay rigid beside her husband in their king-sized bed, plotting. Tomorrow, she decided, tomorrow I will catch them. The test had become her obsession. She no longer wanted to prove his faithfulness. She wanted to prove her suspicions right, to justify the pain eating her alive from inside. Nneka told Obinna she was visiting her mother in Ibadan for 3 days. She packed a bag, ordered an Uber, kissed him goodbye with cold lips, and left at dawn. But she only went to a hotel 15 minutes away in Victoria Island. That afternoon, she returned in an Uber, watching their apartment building from the cafe across the street. The barista gave her strange looks as she sat for hours, but asked no questions. City people understood drama when they saw it brewing. Amaka arrived just after 2, carrying her laptop bag and wearing the black scarf. Nneka's stomach turned violently. So he had given it to her. Through the apartment window, she could see Obinna's face light up when he noticed the scarf. They worked at the dining table, their voices inaudible through glass and distance. Nneka ordered another coffee she wouldn't drink, her eyes never leaving that window. Then, as Obinna stood to get water from the kitchen, Amaka suddenly reached out and touched his hand, letting her fingers rest there. Obinna froze. For a heartbeat, he seemed confused, then gently but firmly pulled his hand away. He took a step back from the table, creating distance, and his expression shifted to concern. "Don't let my wife misunderstand," he said quietly, his tone kind but clear. Amaka's face flushed with shame, and she nodded quickly, closing her laptop. Obinna excused himself to the bedroom, the boundary firmly set. He had done nothing wrong. He had proven his faithfulness in the exact moment of testing. But Nneka, watching from across the street through the cafe window with jealousy clouding her eyes, saw only the touch. She did not see the refusal. She did not hear his words of loyalty. She saw Amaka's hand on her husband's and her vision went red. Her coffee cup shook in her grip. "So it's true," she whispered to herself, her voice breaking. The truth had been offered but she chose blindness instead. She paid and rushed toward the building. Nneka burst into the apartment like a storm giving human form. She screamed accusations, her voice carrying through the thin walls. Other tenants would talk about this for months. Obinna emerged from the bedroom in genuine shock, trying to speak, to explain. Amaka stood frozen by the dining table, panic written across her face. "It wasn't what you saw," she pleaded, tears already streaming. But Nneka was beyond reason. The slap came fast and hard, the sound echoing through their living room. Amaka stumbled backward against the wall, hand to her cheek, eyes wide with pain and betrayal. Obinna moved to intervene, but Nneka turned her fury on him too, calling him a liar and worse. Their home filled with accusation and tears. Someone knocked on the door, asking if everything was okay. 3 lives were breaking apart while neighbors listened through walls. And the true test, the one Nneka had designed, revealed not his weakness, but her own. Trust, once weaponized, destroys everything it touches. By evening, the apartment building buzzed with scandal. Neighbors whispered in the elevator that Obinna was cheating with his wife's best friend. The security guard heard that Nneka had caught them together, that there was violence, that someone called the police. The stories grew with each retelling on the building's WhatsApp group. Some pitied Nneka, others blamed her jealousy. A few wise ones suspected there was more beneath the surface. Nneka sat alone in her bedroom, the silence crashing. She felt vindicated and destroyed at once. That evening, as darkness fell outside their high-rise windows, she heard her phone buzz. A text from Amaka, sent from the Uber leaving the building: "I can't face you. I can't face him. I can't face myself. I'm leaving Lagos. Forgive me, but I cannot stay." Nneka read it 3 times before dropping her phone. Her friend was gone. And somehow, that hurt worse than anything else. The city light sparkled below, indifferent to her pain. Days became weeks. Amaka blocked them both on all social media. The business suffered without her help, though Nneka would never admit it. Obinna grew distant, a shadow of the man who once made breakfast while dancing to Afrobeats. He spoke only when necessary, his voice flat and cold. They moved around the apartment like strangers forced to share an Airbnb. The home that once held joy now felt like a prison. Nneka tried to rebuild bridges, cooking his favorite meals, but Obinna's eyes held something she could not heal: disappointment. One afternoon, while he was at the gym, she went through his laptop. In a hidden folder, she found a photo from 6 months ago: Obinna and Amaka at a business networking event she hadn't attended because she'd been visiting family. Both were smiling professionally at the camera. Why had he kept these photos saved separately? Why had he never mentioned this event? Fresh suspicion bloomed despite the dried blood of old wounds. Trust, once broken, sees betrayal everywhere. 3 months after the scandal, Amaka returned to Lagos. She appeared at their door one Saturday afternoon, thinner, older in her eyes. She had been staying with cousins in Abuja, trying to escape the shame. She came to apologize, her voice small and sincere. Nneka listened from the doorway, arms crossed, her face unreadable. The words were right, but something felt hollow. Forgiveness given in suspicion bears no peace. As Amaka turned to leave, heading toward the elevator, Obinna emerged from the bedroom where he'd been walking. He froze when he saw her. The air became heavy, charged with unspoken things. Amaka's eyes met his for just a moment, and in that glance, volumes were spoken. Then she hurried to the elevator, almost running. Obinna stood very still in the doorway, watching until the elevator doors closed. Nneka watched him watch her. That night, the questions began again. Where had his mind been all day? Why did he look at Amaka that way? That night, in the darkness of their bedroom, Obinna finally spoke truths he had held back. Yes, he admitted, he had tracked down Amaka's location in Abuja weeks ago through mutual friends. Not because he loved her, but because he needed her to return and tell Nneka the truth of what happened. He had taken a flight there and begged her to come back and explain. Nneka's heart twisted between relief and renewed anger. She wanted to believe him, but one question burned on her tongue. Did you stay in the same hotel? The silence that followed was louder than any answer. Obinna turned away from her, his back a wall she could not scale. He had stayed overnight, he finally said, because the last flight was already gone. Different rooms, but he knew how it looked. Nneka felt the world tilt. Perhaps nothing physical had occurred, but what about the heart? What about the feelings that grew in secret? The Lagos night hummed outside their window, indifferent to their pain. The annual company dinner arrived, hosted by the business association they belonged to. Nneka had no heart for networking, but staying home would invite more questions. She went, moving through the hotel ballroom like a ghost. Then the whisper reached her from a colleague: someone had seen Obinna and Amaka talking privately in the hotel corridor. The words struck like a physical blow. Her vision narrowed. Without thinking, she pushed through the crowd, her heels clicking on marble, running toward the back hallways. Her heart pounded with rage and fear. She rounded the corner and there they were, Obinna and Amaka standing near the service entrance, their heads bent together in conversation. Amaka was crying. Obinna's hand hovered near her shoulder but did not touch. They were only talking, but to Nneka's broken mind, it was proof of everything she feared. The world went red. All reason fled. She had tested him once and destroyed their peace. Now she would test him again in front of everyone. Nneka's scream cut through the hotel music and chatter. She accused them both in front of gathering colleagues and business partners, her voice raw with fury and pain. Obinna and Amaka turned, shocked. He tried to approach her, to explain, but she backed away as if he carried disease. The crowd pressed closer, phones recording. Obinna pleaded, his voice cracking, "You've let fear destroy us. She was asking me to forgive her. That's all. Just forgiveness." But Nneka could not hear truth through the storm in her head. She called him a liar and her best friend a snake. Amaka sobbed, trying to speak, but words failed her. Shame burned on every face. Obinna's expression shifted from desperation to something colder, harder. He looked at his wife as if seeing a stranger. Then, without another word, he walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for him. Nneka stood in the ballroom, crying, calling after him. But he did not look back. The party continued, but 3 lives had ended in that moment. 2 days of silence followed. Obinna stayed at a friend's place in Lekki. Nneka waited, fear slowly replacing anger. On the 3rd morning, a package arrived by courier. Amaka's handwriting covered pages of hotel stationery. Nneka read at their dining table with shaking hands. The confession was complete. Yes, Amaka had fallen in love with Obinna. Yes, the test had opened feelings she should have kept buried. But she swore on everything holy that Obinna had never touched her, never encouraged her, never betrayed his vows. He loved only Nneka, even when Nneka stopped loving herself. The test you created destroyed us all, but the guilt is mine alone. I'm leaving Nigeria. Don't look for me. The letter ended with a plea for Nneka to save her marriage before it was too late. Nneka dropped the pages, her whole body trembling. She ran to their bedroom, calling for Obinna. But his closet was half empty. His suitcases were gone. Only his wedding ring remained on the dresser, a circle of broken promises. The bedroom felt enormous and empty. Nneka touched Obinna's ring with one finger, unable to pick it up, unable to accept what it meant. Love built on fear will crumble beneath its own weight. She had wanted certainty and instead had created catastrophe. She had tested love until it broke. She called his phone repeatedly, it went to voicemail. She texted, apologized, begged. No response. Finally, she called his best friend, desperate. The man sighed, pitying her. He left for Abuja this morning. Early flight. He has job interviews there. Starting over. The words hit like stones. Abuja meant distance, new life, escape from her. Nneka grabbed her car keys without thinking and drove to the airport, navigating Lagos traffic with tears streaming. Her phone rang with honking horns behind her. But she drove toward Matola Muhammad International, praying she was not too late. Hoping that love, even wounded and dying, might have enough breath left to forgive. Nneka reached the airport as afternoon heat shimmered off the tarmac. She abandoned her car in short-term parking and ran through the terminal, searching departure boards frantically. Abuja flights, Gate 12. She sprinted past security, begging, explaining, until they let her through. There, near the boarding gate, she saw him, Obinna, carry-on bag beside him, about to queue for boarding. She called his name, her voice breaking over airport announcements. He turned slowly, his face empty of expression. She ran to him, nearly collapsing at his feet, begging through tears that mixed with sweat. Please stay. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please. Other passengers stopped to watch. Obinna looked down at his wife, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. But then it died. He knelt beside her and spoke in a whisper meant only for her ears. You tested my heart until it broke. You put our love on trial every day. I cannot live in a courtroom anymore. He stood, picked up his bag, and walked through the gate. She remained on the floor, watching through tears as he disappeared. Months passed like years. Amaka's Instagram went dark. Mutual friends said she'd relocated to Canada for a fresh start. The rumors eventually died in Lagos' endless news cycle. But Nneka remained in their apartment, managing what was left of the business alone. She became thin and quiet, a shadow drifting through her own life. Her aunt and other relatives who had once envied her marriage now looked upon her with pity. She never dated again. She never seemed to want to. One evening, closing the business account on her laptop, she saw a couple on the street below, holding hands, laughing at some private joke under the streetlights. They moved with the easy joy she and Obinna once shared. The sight broke something inside her that had not yet finished breaking. She closed her laptop with trembling hands and stood on the balcony, staring at Lagos traffic moving like blood through veins. That night, she cried until no tears remained, mourning not just the husband, but the woman she used to be before doubt consumed her. If only she knew that love is not proven by testing, but by trusting. She had wanted certainty in an uncertain world. She had demanded proof of devotion instead of offering faith. And in her search for evidence, she destroyed the very thing she meant to protect. When you let doubt guide your heart, even truth becomes your enemy. Trust is fragile. Once broken, even love cannot rebuild it. Nneka sits in the rain outside their building, holding the past, unable to return to it, learning too late that some tests have no winners, only casualties. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe.